I'm going to have some conversations now with these two lovely ladies here. I have spoken to them before, so I understand their stories. But today is about sharing stories. It's about understanding what people are going through. It's about having those conversations. So, lovely Zoe and lovely Lorraine, we're not related even though we've got the same surname. They're going to share with us today their stories around menopause. And some of it might surprise you, some of it might not surprise you, but I think it's really interesting for us to get all aspects of menopause. It's not always 52-year-old women like me that are going through it. We have younger women as well. So I'm going to sit down so I don't have to stand and introduce you to Zoe and Lorraine. Hi. I'm going to start with Zoe. So Zoe is...
Because I look the most nervous.
No, you don't look nervous. Don't be nervous, don't be nervous. There's only 100-odd eyes looking at you. And they're all really interested in what you've got to say. This is just a chat and a conversation. And if you do have any questions or you suddenly go, I really want to know, pop it on Slido or just wave frantically if you really think there's something that you can add to the conversation. So when I spoke to Zoe the other day, I was quite surprised because she told me she was, I have to say this the right way, don't take this the wrong way, she's 34 and she's gone through menopause. I was like, oh, okay, well, was that early onset menopause? What happened? It's a long story, isn't it? And endometriosis comes into it and bad periods and all sorts of things, but there was also that level of, well, that's just normal. Yeah. So she just put up with it because that's just normal. I'm not going to steal her thunder, but could you just give us a little version of what led you to go through the menopause? And
yeah, so essentially I've always had like quite long periods, not particularly painful, but just longer than what I now know is normal. Again, as a teenager, I didn't know that. It's not something you talked about. And after I had my daughter 8 years ago, I just was really poorly. I was bleeding all of the time, very, again, long periods, very painful periods, and it was slowly getting more debilitating. And obviously the person I spoke to about that was my mum. And I would say to Mum, oh, this is happening. And she'd go, oh, yeah, that's normal. That happened to me after I had you and your brother as well. It's fine. Luckily, I was in a baby group and I was asking some of the women about it, and one of she's quite a close friend now, said to me, oh, I think that might be endometriosis because that's what I've got and these are the same symptoms. Essentially fell down a massive rabbit hole, and after quite a while, I think about 4 years, I was finally diagnosed with endometriosis. At the time it was classed as stage 3. I was told it was unlikely I would have any more children, but luckily I was able to have another child. But after him, I was told it's now stage 4, everything is stuck, and there's nothing else that we can do for you other than have a full hysterectomy. So even though hysterectomy isn't a cure for the condition I have, it would help with the symptoms I was having, because up till the point I had my hysterectomy, I couldn't do anything. For 10 days out of every single month, I was stuck in my house, scared to leave in case I bled through all of my clothes, scared to go to other people's houses. I would carry towels around with me in the car, extra clothes with me. And that wasn't even talking about the pain that I was in. Sometimes I would wake up in the morning and I would be physically shaking because it was just so painful. And doing that with 2 young children and having to explain to them why mummy can't do these things today. So ultimately, I chose to have a hysterectomy. Unfortunately, there were delays in that, and I ended up actually being put into a medical menopause for 10 months prior to my hysterectomy, and it completely changed everything. All of a sudden, I was able to go out and do these things, but I was facing new symptoms. I was getting the night sweats and the hot flushes and the waking up in the morning and feeling like I'd run a marathon the day before, when in reality I'd probably just slept a bit funny. But ultimately, if I look at where I was to where I am now, I would take this any day of the week because my quality of life is just so much better. But I'm now facing the rest of my life as a menopausal woman when I've got my friends around me still having babies. And
that must be quite hard, isn't it? Because I think we look at younger women, we don't think menopause, we don't think any of those symptoms. So it must be, I know when we spoke on the phone, you said people just sort of, I don't ignore you, but they're like, oh, you don't know what we're talking about our hot flushes, and they sort of just push you to one side, and that must feel frustrating.
Yeah, I think
quite hard.
I've been to conferences, webinars, just involved in the conversation, and I think quite often people look at me and think I'm there as an ally for other people as opposed to someone that is going through it myself. And it almost, I think that feeds into your imposter syndrome a little bit sometimes, thinking, oh, I shouldn't be here, I don't know that. And also, I find sometimes when I do go to these sorts of things, I can only half absorb the information that's coming because a lot of the time it's talking about women of a certain period in their life and the different challenges that they face as a 40, 50-year-old, and I'm sitting there going, oh, I've got to go pick my son up from nursery and then I've got to take my young daughter to swimming club, and actually I'm in a completely different phase of my life. So some of the things that are worrying me about being a menopausal woman might not necessarily worry other people about being a menopausal woman.
What are some of the things that you worry about then?
I mean, superficially, I worry about weight gain. Definitely worry about that because I've worked really hard after having my son to lose a lot of weight. So it does genuinely terrify me that already, I'm 4 months since my hysterectomy, and already it's creeping. And to be frank, like sex life, like I'm still in a young relationship with my husband, and there's an expectation and a want, and the concern about, well, maybe I'm not going to want to have sex anymore. Maybe I'm going to have sort of like the vaginal dryness and those sorts of things that we've talked about, and that's not something that any 34-year-old woman really wants to talk about, and it's a little bit embarrassing as well, sort of going to a doctor, but it's not something I can talk about to my female friends because they just, all they see is, oh God, you don't have periods anymore.
Aren't you lucky?
Oh, you're so lucky that you don't have to do this. I'm like, yeah, but I now have to do all of these other things, and I've been messing with my hair for almost 20 years, and in the last couple of weeks I've seen like grey hairs sprouting up that I've never had before, and it's a bit overwhelming sometimes when I think about how much of my life I've got ahead of me, and also a bit surreal. I think sometimes I'll be sitting there and like a Tampax advert will come on, and I'm like, oh yeah, I don't have to worry about that anymore. So sitting there, I'm never going to have a period again, and never going to have even consider having any more children or anything like that. Even though I knew my family was done, having that choice all of a sudden taken away from you is a bit sad sometimes.
And you went through, there was two different things, wasn't there? Wasn't there a chemically induced part, and then there was the medical, let's get it all out? Yeah,
so I had, so because my symptoms got so severe essentially that I was really severely anemic, so I was having to have iron transfusions to keep my blood levels up, and so they decided to put me into a medical menopause, so I'd have, every 28 days I'd have to have an injection, which essentially stopped my ovaries from working. And then I was given like an add-back HRT, which I honestly don't know the science behind it, but I believe it was just enough to keep my levels topped up so I didn't experience the most severe of the menopausal symptoms, but they couldn't give me full HRT. I would imagine it probably counteracts the medication they're giving me, I'm not sure. And I was really lucky with that actually, because I did a lot of research into it, and there was a lot of people that spoke really negatively about it, and they had really awful side effects. But I had headaches, a bit of weight gain, and as I say, the achy body in the morning, but mostly I was okay with it. And I think actually having that prior to my hysterectomy meant that the transition into having everything taken out was actually a little bit easier on my body, rather than some women go from not having their regular hormones to having a full hysterectomy, and I think it's a bit of a hitting a brick wall. So I think I was quite lucky in that aspect.
So that was 10 months, was it?
10 months, so they try not to do it for more than 6 months, but I had other issues going on, so so 10 months in medical menopause, and now I'm 4 months in surgical menopause, and still going.
Yeah. So what symptoms are, so now you're post-menopause, I guess? Yeah,
Yeah,
you would be
well, yeah, it would be,
post-menopause,
yeah.
wouldn't you?
I mean, yeah, when Dr. Louise was talking about the official, once you've not had your period for 12 months, and I was like, oh, do I count as that? And then I was like, oh, actually, no, I do count as that because I've had my menopause before, so even...
Yeah.
But yeah, the symptoms-wise, I'm doing okay, I think. I was just talking to someone saying it's difficult because I don't know how much of like irritability and things is my personality and how much is a lack of the hormones, and then also like which hormones are controlling which part. So I was given estrogen automatically by my consultant. I had to fight him to give me progesterone because I don't have a womb. So he was saying, well, you don't have a womb, you don't need it. But I've done my own research and found studies that are showing, well, if you have your womb removed because of endometriosis, it can be beneficial to have the progesterone because endometriosis feeds off of estrogen alone. And I'd thought about testosterone, but I hadn't quite got there yet, especially because it was such a fight to get my consultant to even give me the progesterone. I thought, I'm not even going to attempt to try and speak to you about testosterone. But today has definitely motivated me, I think, to go to my GP at least and say...
Louise is nodding
yeah,
over there with the thumbs up.
It's encouraged me to go and to try and fight for that, because ultimately I went through all of this to be the best version of myself I can be and to be the best mum and wife and friend, and if I need all of the HRT and things to do that, then why wouldn't I do it? I would take paracetamol if I had a headache. Why would I not take everything I can to live as healthy as I can?
Yeah. So what would your piece of advice be to somebody young like you who's struggling? What would you say to them to do?
I think make sure you have your own back, especially in medical settings. All the way through, I had to fight for what I wanted, and I think I'm quite lucky in that I will fight. I'm not a person that's going to sit and allow someone to say, no, you can't have that. Oh, okay, then that's fine. I will fight my corner. But it really frustrates me that there may be other people out there that won't. And so, for instance, getting my progesterone from my consultant, he turned around to me and said, oh, I'm not going to win this fight. You're a fiery one. I'm just going to prescribe it to you. And I was like, I'm not asking you just to blindly prescribe something to me. I'm asking you to have a conversation and tell me why you don't think it's the right choice when I think it is, because ultimately I'm not a medical professional and you are.
Yeah.
But it frustrates me that there might be other women that will go, oh, okay, well, the consultant said I can't have that. And then they're going to be suffering because they've not potentially got the confidence to stand up and fight. So no one is going to fight for your health better than yourself.
Yeah, that's really good advice. Really good advice. And I know Dr. Louise was talking about her 12-year-old daughter having all this knowledge. You've got an 8-year-old daughter.
She knows everything.
Yeah.
She absolutely understands everything, and even to the point that sometimes she'll walk into the room and I might be really stressed out, and I'll be like, I just need you to leave me alone for a minute so I can sort of regulate myself. And she'll go, is it the menopause, Mummy? I'm like, yes, it's the menopause, thank you.
Yeah. So you believe it's really absolutely to educate from the start to all the way through.
All the way through. When they learn about their periods and in science, and it's just, this is the menstrual cycle and this is how you have a baby. I'm like, but what about the rest of it?
Yeah.
I know about menopause because of the circumstance I've been in, but I've got a sister who's 40 years old and she absolutely is perimenopausal. And I try to explain it to her and she shrugs it off and says, oh, it's just because you've been reading those books. And I'm like, no, but you are. And it's like, yes, I have been reading the books, which is why I understand it.
Yeah.
And I think it's difficult when you're immersed in this world because you understand it to really look outside of it and realise that it isn't talked about enough.
Yeah. And
people just don't know about it. And I've got my mum, my mother-in-law and everyone, I'm just like, go talk about, get HRT, go do this, go do that. But not everyone has that person in their life that's going to raise that awareness, I think.
No. Thank you. That was an interesting story, isn't it? Really interesting story.
Thank you.
And it's quite interesting because obviously finishing off, we're talking about having that knowledge. Moving on to Lorraine. So Lorraine, your story's slightly different, isn't it? And it's almost like there's a little bit of this and a little bit of that and a little bit of that, but you just sort of think, it's not. So tell us a little bit more about what happened for you.
Well, very similar to obviously what we've heard this morning and about light bulb moments. I was operational for a total of 30 years. The first 2 was retained on call. So 28 years the whole time. So I was on the old pension scheme. It got to probably within 3 years of me coming up for, completing my full 30. And I don't know, there was just little things that were going on. So I retired as a station commander, so I was a fire investigator, flexi duty. So quite a busy, lifestyle. I was the fire safety manager, so lots and lots going on. So managing a team, so as you can imagine, it was very full on. And I don't know, it was just little things. It's like, not sleeping very well at night, but I was putting that down to obviously being on duty and getting the phone calls. But usually if I got a phone call, I was out of bed, really quick and what have you. Getting up to go to the toilet more. And then I think the thing it started was when my daughter kept saying to me, "Mum, I told you that 10 minutes ago," or "Mum, you asked me that 10 minutes ago." And then I started getting this complex about my memory and thinking, flipping heck, is there something wrong with my memory? Now, through my whole life, I've never really had a problem with my periods so much. I mean, I did have sort of heavy periods at one point, but nothing out of the ordinary. I've never been one for having, mood swings. So for me, I'm very, very lucky. So when I did start getting, hot flushes, I thought, okay, this is probably down to menopause. But that's all I did really associate, and it was just like the standing joke. And it's like, okay. Then one day I was driving to work and I was on duty and I started getting palpitations and it frightened me. So I literally got to work and I actually went and saw Rocky Health and said, I don't know, I'm a bit worried about this. And then, I don't know, a bit more of the anxiety. So over the next few weeks, I was getting sort of more worried about it. I was worried about my memory and all these things. And I did go to the doctors and I did have the 24 heart thing and everything came back normal. Nothing wrong with me. And then that started me along the lines of thinking, right, I've got 3 years to go. Can I last the 3 years or should I think about taking... I worked up all the sums and it was a case of, right, well, if I leave now, I'll still get my good pension. I won't get as much as I would if I carried on, but I could get myself a part-time job and, boost the money up that way. So after a while, I didn't even think about it being, all those other things being down to the menopause. So after a while, I thought, right, no, I'm going to retire. So I retired smack bang on lockdown, 2 years. So I'd still got my 30 years, as far as I was concerned, operational, because I added my 2 years, retained onto that, on call. Retired, smack bang on lockdown, and then a fire safety job came up at work. So it's like, right, 3 days a week. I wanted to get back to work, so applied for it, got it. Went back to work with Bedfordshire Fire and Rescue Service. And then I had previously been to one of the WFS weekends and what have you years ago. Went to the very first one that was ever held, etc. And had the opportunity of going again. So, of course, just before I went on this weekend, someone in our assistant chief asked whether I could sit in on a meeting. And it was to do with menopause and it was with Hayley and what have you. And I said, yeah, okay, I'll sit on it, for you. And because I'd gone to the weekend and I'd chosen my workshops, there was one around the menopause. And I thought to myself, I'll see if I can swap my workshops so I can do that one. Then I'll have a bit more knowledge for when I go, on this meeting. So anyway, I sat in this workshop, not really knowing exactly what to expect. And then during the conversation, they threw up
There's a slide. I don't know if
they
we can
threw
get
up
the slide
a slide.
up, actually. I'm sure they'll put it up for us in a minute.
Yeah, they threw up a slide, and then I looked at it, and then it was that typical light bulb moment. So, yeah, so if the slide is able to come up, then we can just have a quick look. So the thing is, even now this morning, there are still some other things which, I mean, I did quickly jot down. So, what was it, like you said about restless legs? You know, that's another thing. It's like, well, I hadn't really thought about that. Dry eyes, I get dry eyes. One thing I didn't see on there was I noticed I sometimes have to, I've now started getting the odd, dark, you know, having to get the tweezers out in the morning, which, you know.
It's not good with these lights either, is it, really?
I did that before. But I think the important thing is I had that light bulb moment where I looked at this particular slide and it was like, tick, palpitations, the anxiety, the going to the toilet, the weight gain I sort of knew about.
Well, you can see it down here in front of us.
So this isn't the full slide, but this was the main things on that. And so I was looking at that, and then if we can show the second slide, like I say, because it was almost like a light bulb moment.
Next slide.
Wherever.
There you go.
Yeah, so the sorts of things like hot flushes I expected, night sweats, bloating and weight gain, irregular periods, those sort of things, it's what I sort of knew. Headaches, I was getting headaches. In fact, still now, like I say, I did ask the question about the age because I never have actually been to the doctors and had HRT, but because I'm 60 but still experienced some of these bits, I thought I was too old. But obviously, I think after now, I am going to go to the doctors to see if it will actually help with some of the bits. But yeah, digestion changes. Yeah, sometimes itching of the skin, joint pain, you know, sort of like the sex drive and stuff like that. I wouldn't have had a clue, but that wasn't really the bits that would affect me as such. But it was the things like feeling the tiredness, the memory lapses and brain fog. I'd never have put it down to menopause. Concentration lapses, anxiety, dizziness, as you can see, sleep and the palpitations. I would never have put it down to menopause. And then it sort of dawned on me, and I thought to myself, do you know what? If I'd have actually seen that and known that now, would I have actually retired? I would probably have gone to the doctors and I probably would have completed my 30 years operational. And it's as much as that, you know, they're just very subtle little things which if you don't know about, and that's why now every opportunity I get, you know, I'll try and push this. We did, you know, an event in Bedfordshire last year and we tried to encourage, you know, we tried to get as many men and what have you. It was a really successful event, but there's still a lot of people that do think that they're too young and, you know, that they don't have to worry about it yet. But if it's that little bit of knowledge, if I'd known then what I know, or knew when I went to the conference, then I probably would have, could have recently retired rather than retiring 3 years ago.
Yeah. And I'm sure that there are many women out there that think the same. They think, oh, you know, maybe it's time. Maybe I'm just tired. Maybe it's time to give up work. And actually, we're losing that knowledge, experience and expertise from these amazing people that have got so much to give, and so they retire. And surely we don't want that. Yeah, and we want to encourage people to stay and enjoy their careers to the end. Yeah. So especially sort of things like the brain fog and, you know, memory loss. And like I say, it's when someone's sort of saying to you, Mum, you know, you asked that 10 minutes ago, and I'm thinking, did I? And then it got to the point where I was worried about asking the question because, hang on, have I already asked them that? You know, and it was just like a little vicious circle. And it sort of feels like it almost makes that vicious circle. So if you're struggling with palpitations and then you start worrying about it, you think, oh, well, maybe it's the worry about it that's creating it. It is that vicious circle. And then you push it to one side and know, oh, it's just normal.
Yeah,
So what would your message be? What would you want to come out of this?
Well, to be honest with you, I think the biggest thing is getting everyone to realise that it's going to affect everybody in some form or another, and it's better to learn about it now. You know, like I say, it is this stigma, but if you don't know, you don't know. So it's just about getting people to actually come on these sessions, or hopefully, if this is recorded, actually watch it afterwards.
Yeah, it's all going to be recorded.
So at least they've got the knowledge as well. Yeah. But it's the ones that think, oh, you know, it's not going to happen. Well, it's not going to happen to me for a long while. I won't bother about it now, just yet. I'll wait till later. But actually, if you know now, you know, and again, it's about supporting people like now I know. So if I thought I saw somebody that was perhaps going through something similar, at least now I know, well, actually, have you considered this?
And you're absolutely right. It's the impact of understanding this. Maybe it might not be for you, but it might be for your colleague. It might be for your sister. It might be for your friend. If you know all of this, then you can help other people. It doesn't just have to be for you. It can be for anybody. Somebody's husband, somebody's boyfriend, somebody's brother. It's not just, as we said at the beginning, it's not just the women. It's that bigger community. It affects everybody.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, ladies. That was really lovely to hear your stories.
Thank you.